Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Collison. I'm the CliftonStrengths Community Manager here at Gallup. I'm here with Amatoga Jeremie, and we are glad to have her. Amatoga, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. I'm glad to be here with you, with
Yeah,
all of
great.
you.
Great to have you here today. We're talking about cultivating strengths in a multicultural teams. And Amatoga, let's take a second though to get to know you. So tell us who you are. We see your top five on screen, but for those listening on audio, roll through those and then tell us what you do for Gallup.
Sure. So my top five Clifton strengths are strategic, learner, connectedness, context, and positivity. And I am a learning and development consultant here at Gallup.
That's awesome. How long you been here with us? How long you been spending time at
Oh,
Gallup?
sheesh. I have to blow the dust off my brain. How long has it been? 2 years. I'm going to
That's
close out
awesome.
my 2 year anniversary.
Awesome. Great having you and great getting to see you at our summit here in June. It was great meeting you there. Let's remind the audience as they're checking in, let us know your top five so you can drop in the LinkedIn chat. Let us know what your top five if you know that. If you don't, that's okay. Just let us know where you're listening from, and that will kind of get us started as people are coming in. Producer Riley behind the scenes will throw that up on the screen as well. Amatoga, let's get started a little bit. When we think about this idea of multicultural teams, right? What makes what makes it multicultural? Let's kind of set the stage, set the definition for that.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to break up the word multi, meaning various or many, and then we have culture. And when we talk about culture in general, we're talking about beliefs, habits, rituals, language, worldviews, and values that are shared by a group of people. And so when we think about a team meeting, so imagine that we're sitting around a table, there's about 10 of us on a team. Each of us represents a group where we share those beliefs, habits, rituals, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the workplace, when we talk about a multicultural team, for me, that definition is various, many ways of working, many ways of doing business, and we're all contributing our perspective.
When we think about the multicultural aspect of teams and the thinking, the thought, the
Mhm.
background that brings that, talk a little bit because I think sometimes we hear that word and we think it's got to be global in that sense. Can we think about multicultural from a local standpoint as well?
Oh, absolutely. If you're thinking about the United States, we know that,
Yeah.
our ways of doing business and how we interact with each other in the workplace on the East Coast or in major cities is quite different when we go to more rural environments or even in different regions. So it doesn't always have to be global, but I think it's helpful to think about ways of working and doing business and how we view working on a team. That is plural, it's multiple. um, yeah, I think I'll leave it there for
Yeah.
people to pick up.
Right. And certainly as we look at the chat coming in, we're seeing different locations, both in the United States and
Right.
globally as well. I think,
Mhm.
and I think about my role here at Gallup in the last 10 years, maybe 12, as we began to do these webcasts, and we started in the United States, but now we do them in 7 different languages around the world, plus in English in different spots around the world, and they all add a different element from a cultural standpoint, right?
Mhm.
It has been, I tell you, I've had an education in, I've been schooled oftentimes as I've gotten on these and maybe made incorrect assumptions in the beginning as I've came to them. What makes us nervous? I get a little nervous sometimes about that, but what makes us nervous about coaching multicultural teams? What's the why does that make us nervous sometimes?
We feel so much pressure as coaches and consultants to provide the insights, um, to be the one to deepen the leaders or the team's understanding of the dynamics. And really, that's not our job. Our job is to facilitate a conversation where they arrive at their own conclusions, that they come up with recommendations for how to build a healthy, productive work relationship with each other. We do not have to be the subject matter expert. And when we keep thinking that, we run the risk of imposing our ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving in the workplace on a team that functions in a completely different environment than what we're accustomed to. I think we're nervous about that. So we need to listen, observe the team, and ask questions.
I love the last thing you said there is ask questions. I think for
Mm-hmm.
me, that was going into some of those situations. I always felt like I should know everything there is to know about everything. And I think a lot of people, they don't want to embarrass themselves. They don't want to say something that creates tension or maybe, in that kind of situation. And, and so we don't ask those questions. And I think one of the things I learned a little bit, and I'm still learning in this, is to get those questions out up front.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let's be really clear. I don't know this. Can you tell me about it? How else? What other kinds of questions can we use, knowing we're going into those, maybe into some of those situations? What other questions can we ask to kind of dig some of that out?
So, so let me start with our purpose. So, as the coach, as the consultant, what you want to do is get them to identify and then articulate, okay, what are the habits, the practices, the behaviors on the team that are healthy, that are productive, that help us to, you know, perform at our best, and which one should we continue or start? And in the same vein, they'll start to identify the ones that we should stop because they are hurtful to our relationship, hurtful to our performance. So our questions should come out of what we see, what we observe of the team dynamic, what we hear them say to each other or about the work that we do. So I have a story, Jim. I'm sorry if I'm going to take up your with a
No,
story, but storytelling is
that's,
important.
yeah.
When early in my career, I was working at an educational institution in Colombia. And I quickly realized that nobody continued working during lunch. Everybody stopped working during lunch. And me coming from a land where brown bag lunches are popular, working through lunch, sometimes even without food, is normal. I come to this place where there's a kitchen in the building. Why? Because people take at least an hour to not only make their lunch, but share it with their colleagues. They go home to have lunch with their families and friends, or sometimes they go out with clients to enjoy a meal. And at first, I was thinking, wow, they really don't think this work is important. And I started to feel like I was being undervalued because, they weren't taking time out, sacrificing their lunch to do work with me. And then I realized anytime they came back from lunch, they were completely recharged. They were ready for the second half of the day. But me, I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to get this done with or without. And I quickly found out that I couldn't do anything because everyone that I needed was at lunch. So I had no choice but to stop working. But I realized building relationships is work. Connecting with the people that I work with, that I serve, is also work. And recharging for the remainder of the day helps me to be more productive. That came from observation and asking, why does everyone stop working at lunch? But if I had continued with the way of working that I knew and making those assumptions about what they value in their performance, I would have never learned a way that actually makes me more productive that I still subscribe to even at Gallup. I try to avoid lunchtime meetings. And if it is, there has to be food.
Well, and even asking sometimes, can we work through lunch on this? Like that doesn't,
Yes.
I mean, there may be appropriate
Yes.
moments. I think, and if you're just joining us and you're on LinkedIn, throw your top five in chat. If you have questions, we'll be taking those from the chat room as well. I think for me, anyways, and I'll throw this out, and you can kind of expand on it. One of the things that always benefits me is when I'm leading teams or coaching teams or thinking about this from a multicultural standpoint. I'm at my best when I'm leading with positive intent on what's going on, as those
Mhm.
as those individuals were disappearing. If we'll take the opposite approach to this, they're like, why are they disappearing at lunch? Don't they know there's things to get done? Right? That's not leading with positive intent, right? That's like, oh, I
Right.
wonder, like, maybe I should ask, hey, when I'm booking these meetings at lunch, is that is that an issue? Is it right? Are there other ways as we think about leading with positive intent, or anyways, that we can be more successful? How can we win rather than lose on these conflicts? And by the way, they work probably across a variety of teams, but
Mhm.
additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, the question that came up was, well, how do people spend their time during the workday? Because when you ask that, then you get a more holistic view of what people need in order to perform at their best throughout the day, what drives their performance, um, who they choose to spend that time with, and what fills their cup. But as you said, when I just said, well, why isn't anyone working? That's I'm coming in with an assumption, and I'm not leading with positive intent. I'm now labeling.
As we think about this in the context of strengths, right, and
Hmm.
knowing someone's top five, does that add an additional a dimension in discovering like what's going to work best for this team? How do we blend that in, and what can we do with it to help, in addition to, hey, when do we take lunch? Like, how can we use top five in teams to help with that?
Absolutely. It's easy to throw a theme party where everyone gets excited about their woo and their positivity and their focus. But for me, strengths, it's a common language. So I mentioned before that definition of strength, of culture. And I mentioned that a shared language is very important, for as a unifying force for a group of people. Strengths can do the same because when I say connectedness, you know a little bit about my motivation, what drives me to be at my best. You know a little bit about my beliefs about doing business, that you know that there is a right way and a wrong way to do business when people are involved, because I'm concerned about humanity. That's how I approach everything that I do. You also hear what I need in order to be at my best when I say my top strength is strategic. And you have a little bit more insight into the environment in which I thrive in. I need to be planning. I need to be around people. I need to collaborate. I need the why. And I need an entrepreneurial environment. I need a little bit of autonomy. But that's me. I am one member of the team. That doesn't mean that each member is the same as me. So the coach helps the leaders and the team members find that out about each other.
As you're saying these things, I'm thinking about this idea of inclusion, right? Of
Mhm.
making sure everyone's included in the decision making and the process, and some of the things we're doing. How does that process, to me it sounds like some homework needs to be done up front sometimes to make sure
Mhm.
like we
Right.
just dive into the work and not maybe necessarily thinking about the multicultural aspects of things. How do we avoid that? And what kind of pre-work can we do ahead of time? You've mentioned the things already, but what other kind of pre-work can we do ahead of time to make sure we're all on the same page?
Mm. Jim, when my connectedness and my individualization come together, I start thinking in Venn diagrams. I can't help myself. I can simultaneously see what everyone shares, what the common ground is, but I can also honor the unique contribution of everyone on the team. So I think a conversation that a coach can help facilitate, or leadership can help facilitate, is first of all, regardless of where we come from on the team or what our workplace experiences are, what do we share? Habits, um, beliefs about work, what we need, kind of the environment that we thrive, the clients that we love, all the things. What do we have in common? Maybe it's our values. Family is important to every single person on the team. That's a unifying force. But then we also need to respect, honor, and appreciate the one thing that each individual brings that no one else on the team brings, or how they think, or how they do things. And that goes in the separate circles in the Venn diagram. I think that's some good pre-work, not just for a coach, but for the team.
Yeah, and I think when I hear you say that, I always think of this because it takes the whole team leading with positive intent to make this work, right? Everybody kind of needs to begin to say, "Hey, look, there may be some things happening here
Mm-hmm.
that don't feel right to me," but I think we all have to be able to be open. You said something about you didn't say it in this phrase, but we have this exercise called the best of me. Right, you get the best of me when, and then we begin to, I wonder sometimes early in the process, that one question is part of a bigger exercise, but
Mm-hmm.
it sometimes I feel like connecting with that idea of, hey, you get the best of me when, we should ask that question a lot more often, right? I don't know, you're shaking your head. Respond to that for me. What do you
Oh
think?
yes, no, just for those of you who are unfamiliar with the exercise, you get the best of me when, you get the worst of me when, you can count on me too. This is what I need from you. And leading with positive intent begins with leadership, modeling the behaviors, um, how the leader interacts and what they say to the members of the team, the healthy practices, just modeling what it looks like to work best together. It does start with the leader. And if the leader starts every conversation, every action with positive intent, then the team members will also follow suit.
Mm. Well, I'm going to take some questions from the chat room here in just a second. So if you have some questions,
Mhm.
drop them in. Put a Q in front of them so that I can see them easier as well. But what are some strategies as we think about this for creating a safe space in team environments? Like, it's one thing to say lead with positive intent or begin with
Mhm.
positive intent. That's easy to say. But creating that safe space that actually works, what are some strategies for that? What's your thoughts on that?
I'm going to bring back storytelling. And
Mm.
before you dismiss, guys, what I'm about to say, just listen. Just listen for just a second. We tell stories to give people the information they need to know. Through stories, that's how we know right and wrong. That's how we know how to treat people. That's how we learn the principles of respect, of honor, legacy. We learn our values through those things. And we don't do enough of it in the workplace. And by stories, I mean success stories, client impact stories, memories from just working, from events and working at the institution. But the story that creates a safe space is actually one where it requires vulnerability and it requires us to be honest about those times when we were not so victorious. Maybe we were not heard. We did not feel seen or valued. This was something that we had to overcome because we couldn't ask for help, ask those questions, take a risk, pitch an idea. Now, if the leader models that type of storytelling, like, let me tell you about an experience who has made me the kind of leader that I am today. But let me tell you something, this was rough. And now it invites other team members to share their experience. You realize, even if the circumstances were different, guess what? We all went through this thing. And now we can start a conversation about, okay, what are the habits that we're not going to continue because it makes people feel undervalued, unsafe, unheard, etc. And what are we going to start doing to make sure that that doesn't happen to anyone here on this team? So I think storytelling is powerful,
Mm.
starting with leadership.
How important are the words "I'm sorry" in, like what you just said? Sometimes say, "Hey, what you did when you scheduled
Mhm.
things at lunch, that hurt me." That's a pretty bad example, but let's just run with that one because that's what we're talking about here. But say we did do something that was hurtful, not intentionally, right? But two cultures colliding maybe at some point. How
Mhm.
do we get to that point to be able to say, I'm sorry? That's so hard it's hard for me to say sometimes, I'm sorry. How do we get there? What's some again, because that helps create that safe space. How do we get better at that, do you think?
I think this is my activator talking, my activator talents. You just have to do it. And I'm someone I'm just it's really hard for me to admit that I'm wrong right now. But I felt that when I scheduled this meeting during lunch, it was really tense after that. You didn't talk to me, and I feel like something's wrong. So can we address it right now?
Yeah.
Even though I'm very embarrassed to admit this to you,
Yeah.
but that's my approach. I'm just going to say it and I'm going to tell you how I feel, how it's making me feel. And I'm hoping, that they'll be responsive. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I have, what's worked well for me, is to say, you know what, I think I made a mistake. And can I tell you that? And let's work through this. Cause I think maybe I misunderstood, or it just happened this weekend. I was assuming I was working with the team in China, and I was assuming I was going to do some work and they were going to do some work. And it was really, I was going to do some work. And so I was waiting, and I had to say, I'm sorry, I misunderstood in this. Let's move forward to see what we can do, right,
Mhm.
to make it right. Just a small example, but one, I think, again, getting back to that positive intent of saying, you know what, this doesn't feel right. Where did we go wrong in this, and maybe help me understand where we could do this differently. I don't know. Would you add anything to that?
And I think when keeping it to team performance or team
Yeah.
relationship, so
Yeah.
framing it in that way. So, you admit wrongdoing, but then you acknowledge what it did to you, hurt or corrode trust in the team relationship, or what it did to hurt performance. It's almost a way of giving yourself feedback. Like, I acknowledge that my action or what I said derailed us, or it stalled, or it hurt
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Let's take some questions from chat. John says, how do you generate connectivity in remote environments? So in this context, give us some clues. What are some things as we think about creating connectivity? You have connectedness and context in your top 5, which I think could play into this a little bit. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, in remote environments. So if you do have opportunities to see each other in person, take full advantage. And what I mean by that, I like events. Maybe it's company events or team events where it happens, doesn't happen often, and maybe a few people that's on the team can go, but take full advantage to build relationships when you are in person. Now, if that's not possible, I mean, breakout rooms are the best. Okay, put some folks in a breakout room, have some sort of icebreaker that gets people chatting about what they enjoy most or what they're looking forward to for the week or the weekend. Just give them 10 minutes to just chat, not a status update. No one's talking about milestones right now. Give people time. And you leverage, the tech tools that allow for that human interaction. It can still happen, even if we do have a screen, you can still
Yeah.
get to know folks.
Well, and we kind of do that here a little bit, even though we have a group. It's just you and I.
Mhm.
Everyone else is on the call viewing us, right? But we throw out, hey, put in your top 5 and where you're connecting from today, as that attempt to build community. Now, in our sense, we're not going to build it too deeply, although I know the chat room will start talking to each other at
Mhm.
some point during this, right? They begin to connect that way. But I love your idea, and I think we need to be really intentional about this, especially with teams that are maybe new or haven't met together in a while, is to set an expectation for the first few minutes. We're just going to kind of connect, and it's okay, right? We don't have to get work done during those few minutes, right? And we at Gallup, we call that a focus on you. We say, hey, we're going to spend some time doing a quick focus on you. Everybody kind of knows, okay, name, what you do, and then maybe an additional question, right? It's something as simple as that to get the conversation going remotely, to get people moving around on the screen, to like you said, to not necessarily get things done, but to get the
Mhm.
people done, right? Get the
Yes,
people figure. I don't know, what else would you add to that? And does that conjure anything for you?
it does. And I do this myself. I'm never going to ask you to do something I won't do myself. But
Mhm.
scheduling 15 to 30-minute one-on-ones with folks that they just intrigue you. Or maybe they said something during a meeting and you're like, I want to get to know this person. Or, maybe you just want to hear about their origin story. That's my context, right? How did you even get here? How did you get to this role? Just reach out, schedule those one-on-ones. 15 minutes with somebody, that might be in a different place than you, but you just build a new relationship.
Couple quick questions here at the end, and they're very similar. I think I'll do one after the other, and then we can talk about them together. So, if any, what possible way can an employer utilize these strengths immediately? And we're thinking about CliftonStrengths in this context to create an inclusive and diverse environment. And then this question relating to it: what can I share with a leader who thinks using strengths and strengths language increases bias? Amatoga, can you talk about that?
Oh, sure. So we do. Our strengths do create a bias. You can call them watch out fors. Our official, other people call them blind spots, but our strengths do create a bias, a filter through how we see the world. And that influences how we approach every single situation. But we do need to be aware of those things. And so and that's just on the individual level. So for example, my positivity, this is great for morale. It's great for creating a safe environment for people to be themselves, but I have to watch out for my emotional touch points. It's a bias because what I want you to do is feel great all the time. I want to be your cheerleader. I kind of want to minimize, any losses or failures, any nosedives and results. That's a bias that I have. And so everybody has this. You have a way that you do things and that come naturally to you. And then there are things you're not so aware of, which is why you need your team. They hold you accountable. They're like, hey, Amatoga, like that you might want to rethink how you said that or how you approach this person or this client. This is what I saw happen. So regardless of whether you use strengths or not, we all have a bias. And a coach can help you as an individual and the team identify and articulate what those biases are. Because even the team has a bias for action or not. The team tends to sit here and strategize and have ideas all day and nobody takes a step. So that's also a bias.
Yeah. I think sometimes folks approach strengths or they approach any of these team, where we think about team and team formations and improving that as it's going to create a perfect team. And they're never going to have any conflicts and it's always going to go right. And I think we kind of have to approach this from like, these are tools to help the teams run better, but also handle conflicts better. Right. And it's never going to be perfect. Listen, people are people. They're going to argue. They're going to fight. They're going to misunderstand. Right. But it does give us some tools, right, to kind of speed up that understanding if we're open to it. Right. I don't know. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I'll give a specific example. I mentioned earlier that integrity is very important to me. There is right and wrong, especially when we do business and there are people involved, because I always think that lives are at risk no matter what we do. Then you might have somebody on the team who believes that we need to do whatever it takes for the client. Now, you can see that there's a common ground here. That there will be times when me and my teammate or me and my leader, we're just like, yes, we're going to do right by our client. We're going to do whatever it takes. But you can also see where this can cause friction. Because doing whatever it takes for the client is not always the same thing as doing right by people, or at least, from my perspective. But we know this about each other. So we're more inclined to tease it out and ask the necessary questions to use the friction to be productive. But if we didn't know that about each other, it becomes a personal issue. It becomes a personal fight. And that's not the point.
Amatoga, we've covered a lot of ground, although there's a lot more questions in the chat. What I would encourage folks, this video, as soon as we've wrapped it up, will live on LinkedIn there where you came. There's some comments below. I'd love to see folks interact a little bit. It's more than just what we can say in the 30 minutes that we're here. I'd love to see folks interact in the chat. It stays with the video, and I just think there's a lot to this. Anything, Amatoga, anything else as we think about wrapping this up? How would you close our time up here today?
So I would wrap this up when we're thinking about creating safe spaces, making sure that everyone is heard and experiences are valued. The way we run our meetings and facilitate conversations needs to be intentional, and it needs to be co-crafted. We need conversation structures or meeting protocols that allow multiple modes of participation. Some of us have strengths or come from environments where vocalizing your ideas and questions in front of a large group is encouraged and you feel comfortable to do so, but it leaves a lot of us kind of in the dust. Those of us who need think time, processing time for our best contribution. And if we're going to create inclusive environments, safe ones where everyone feels like they can pitch in, we need to figure out what are all the ways in which someone can participate through questions, through ideas, through solutions, and make sure your agendas also align with that. This is a brainstorming session. This is what we're brainstorming about. Bring your ideas. They don't have to be the best. Just bring ideas, you know? Or this is a solutions meeting. Bring your solutions. They don't have to be the best. That allows for people to think, to ruminate, to interact with each other, and to feel like they have something to bring. That's all I'd like to say.
I love it. A great way to wrap that. Thank you for being my partner today in this discussion, and appreciate you and appreciate the work that you do for us. Appreciate everyone out in the chat room. Great questions. Again, let's continue the conversation there in the comments. If you want to add to it, or you've got more questions, throw those out there as well. I will remind you that if you want to catch the full recording of this, maybe you came late, we'll make that available through the CliftonStrengths podcast. So head out to your favorite podcast player and search CliftonStrengths and subscribe to that. A lot of great content coming out through that, and we'll publish that out there as well. Amatoga, again, thanks for doing it. I'm going to do what I always do after this, and as soon as we're done, I'm going to ask you this question: how did we do? Right? I want to get some feedback. Did we do the best work together? For me, it often works. I like to do right as soon as we're done. I like to ask some of those questions so that when we work together again, maybe I don't make the same mistake twice, right? In that as well. So, Amatoga, thanks for coming out. For those listening live, appreciate you guys as well. See you back here next time. Make sure we have another event scheduled here on LinkedIn. Make sure you get scheduled for those as well. Take care, everybody.